Okay. Welcome, folks, to Liberty Uncensored. My name is Corey King, and today I am going to be talking about cinematography. Now, please let me know if you can hear me. There's been some audio issues happening with Substack, and just let me know if you can hear me. If you can't hear me, we'll restart her again, but if you can hear me, we'll keep going. Now, cinematography, the art of the moving picture. This is not a new concept at least since 5000 BC. There has been attempts at making the moving picture, making a continuous stream of images that provide the mimicry of what we observe with biological reality, the continuum of our observation of the world around us, unbroken, a moment captured and then retained over time. But what I'm going to be talking about mostly today is not actually cinema. It is perception. It is how perception is manipulated, how perception is controlled, and how worldviews and religions and belief structures of all types, political endeavors, whatever it might be, political systems, anything at all is shaped very easily by those who control the perception generating mechanisms that pervade the planet. And I am going to go much faster today than I did on Saturday because I have other things that I want to talk about today as well. And I am going to close this out with talking about what's going on in Ireland right now and how that involves perception generation and how that's been used in the past. And so we'll get to that. First, we have to understand these mechanisms of perception, manipulation, and control. And again, if my audio doesn't work at any time, please let me know in the chat because I have been having some problems with the audio. Thank you. Now, on my Monday article, Cinematography, Choice, and Responsibility, I asked folks to respond to this. If a film can reliably shape how millions interpret an event, where does the responsibility actually lie? Does responsibility land on those who create something in the world for others to ingest, or does the responsibility land on those who ingest it? It was actually an even poll. It came out the same. People say with the viewer, or actually they said a shared responsibility, or with the viewer, which means that we're leaning on the idea that it is with the viewer. The responsibility lands on those who have choice and leverage that choice to decide upon whatever they want to ingest. But what happens when that choice is already been chosen for you before you even access the content, before you access the moment of decision? What if the decision's already been made for you by the mechanisms, by the environment that you are in? The construct of perception itself is based on very basic scientific facts that cannot be overturned by idealism or ambiguous notions of being free or something like that. Choice is something that you do based off the available information that you have. You make decisions only based on what you know. You can't make decisions based on what you don't know. You can't make decisions based off of, or a conscious decision can't be made off of what is implanted subconsciously into the mind that motivate us. which is to create movement towards something, some goal, to move us, to motion us towards some sort of decision. Now, if we have a conscious understanding that we enjoy one, uh, enjoy one type of chocolate over another or something like this, minor decision making processes. Well, that decision, that whether we like it or not, might not be based on the taste or the quality of that chocolate or where it comes from or anything like that. And most likely it isn't. Most likely it is based on a large collection of data that has been placed into the mind subconsciously to guide us to that decision that has already been made through the mountain of information that we don't consciously uh, access to make those decisions. So we think we're making a decision when in reality we're making a decision only of the various things that we're allowed to make a decision on from the environmental factors that have cultivated our narrow perception. So the the construct of cinema or cinematography or the kinematographos, the moving picture, is that we have still images one after another that pass through our observation fast enough that they seem to flow together into a one singular moving image. This is the art of the cinematograph. This is the ability to make it appear like what we observe in the natural observable world. But there are two different mechanisms happening here. One is a trick, and one is the natural way in which we operate our physical being. When we are observing the world around us, we are not doing this through captured moments. We are doing this in one continuous stream. The continuum of observation does not get diced apart into an infinite amount of frames that we then have to reorganize. This isn't the way that the brain and the eyes, this isn't the way that we function. What's actually happening is that we are observing one continuous moment in continuity and in perpetuity. And when we recall something, it is a physical architecture in the brain that we are recalling that is based on sensory input and um, emotional entanglement into that that experience that we then put away in a physical architecture in the brain so that we can recall. And there's many different types of memory, but what we're talking about right now is not genetic memory or anything like that. This is the memory that we store from events that we experience in our lives while we're alive. Now, we have this biological reality, which is always contained within the moment that we are in, and the recall, which is the physical architecture, which is stored memory. And then we have daydreaming, which is the future, which operates similarly, which is that even when you're daydreaming in this moment. You're bringing a future potential to this moment, the dream of the future. When you're dreaming, you're doing the same thing when you're sleeping. Still in this moment. You're not in another moment. Now, when we apply the cinematograph, which is the still frames, the pictures that we can grab from a moment that capture reality, and then we apply this in a very quick frame by frame passage across our observation. It feels like real observable reality. And we ingest that information as if it is so. But the problem is that what is put on that screen that we are watching, the frame by frame that is passing before our eyes, is able to be created in any number of ways. So it is not reality. It is a moment of reality. And also, when you take a picture, everything that's not in that picture is also part of the reality of that picture that you took, right? But you only captured a moment, a parcel of that information that was available in that moment. So it actually is just a very small portion of the reality of that moment. Everything before and after that capture was taken, and around that image was all the reality that gave context to the image itself, but we didn't carry that forward. We didn't bring that to, as we carried that image through time, we did not bring that context with it. We brought the narrow context that we were allowed based on what was available through that image. Now, these still images that are applied in the cinema, when we go and we view it on the screen, these are highly cultivated environments. And so 10,000 things could be placed in every single still image that are not the main theme of that image, and thus we aren't consciously aware of it occurring. For those who are highly adept at paying attention and finding the subtle things in the imagery, they might be able to catch some of them, but you're never going to catch all of them. And these 10,000 things will enter into the subconscious mind, and they will guide conscious decision later. Your conscious mind will pay attention only to those things that are for the conscious mind naturally to pay attention to. And that oftentimes looks like fast movements, bright, flashy images and colors. These types of things are where the conscious mind directs its attention to as a biological necessity. I'm pretty sure everybody knows this at this point, probably, that for the sake of protection against predators, we have the ability or the inherent quality that is, when we see bright colors, we think danger. When we see fast moving things before us, our attention automatically drifts toward whatever that is and stays locked on that thing. This has been a predatory response, amongst other things, but when we go to the cinema and we watch the fast moving object, all of the background subtleties enter into the subconscious, and we are susceptible to all sorts of manipulation from this. What started with the thaumatrope and phenakistoscope and the cinematograph in the late 1800s quickly developed into further and further developed technologies that allowed for the hacking of the brain, the ability to hack what people perceive as reality, because there is no mental architecture that defines a difference between what we see in the cinema and what we see in our real observable reality. Thus, your conscious mind might make the distinction and say, what I'm watching is just a creation, it's fake. I'm at the cinema, I'm watching this thing, it's fake, or I'm watching the television or whatever. But your subconscious mind isn't making these kinds of distinctions. Your subconscious mind is taking in this information as if it is real and if it is the reality that it needs to respond to, and to create formations around and recall. Now, the Kuleshov effect proved to us that the human mind is the mechanism for which creating interpretation about film occurs. The same way that we interpret reality based on the limited reality that we experience. Thus, if I'm not in China, I don't know what's happening in China right now, right? I only have the limited reality in which my experience can guide me. Now, the same thing is happening when we go to the cinema. The Kuleshov effect was proven by showing a neutral face, followed by different images producing different interpretations. Thus, if you show the same neutral face and then you show a war scene, it might produce rage or anger or sadness from the viewer. Well, if you show that same face and then show a bunch of playful puppies, it might make people think that the face was actually a joyful face or a content face. And we are interpreting on a guided stream the content that is given to us through the cinematograph. By any other name, the cinematograph as it has developed over time. So when we're watching the television, scene by scene, we're seeing only partial imagery that we are then interpreting what is happening between the imagery. We are creating architecture around that imagery. And this has been these tools started as cinema. They started as what was happening when people went to the theater, and then they developed into uh, what happens on the news when people are watching the news. So in the 1950s, when people assumed that the news was honest and full of integrity, compared to what we have today, it might have been, who knows, but I doubt it. The news also became a user or a manipulative tool because it used these same mechanisms of guided interpretation, which um, shouldn't surprise anybody. And yet people still watch the news and think that they're getting some sort of information out of it when in actuality they're getting prompts for creating interpretations which then guide their perceptions and their reality, their worldview. So the shot, the capture that is created by pointing a camera and then the cut of that camera to the next scene from scene, creating a shift of attention, which then creates the interpretation that we naturally create through our natural observation of the world. The image retains the authority of reality, especially in the subconscious, but also it can influence the conscious mind to make decisions immediately, but it retains that architecture. Sound and imagery do the same thing, which is that they control the way in which I shouldn't say sound and imagery control. It's actually the way that these are delivered through cinema and the audio component of cinema. It delivers emotional entanglement into imagery and into narrative created by the mind creating its interpretations of what it's seeing. And through this entire thing, we have the ability to control masses of populations very easily. Whoever controls the medium controls the mind. Who controls the medium? I'll get into that in a little bit. But it is indisputable at this point that we can say that whatever the content is far less important than the construct of delivery of that content. The same interpretation happens when you read a book. You read in between the lines. But when it's in the form of cinema, it enters into the mind in a very direct, controlled way. A book leaves a large amount of interpretation of the world that's created around what you're seeing. Cinema places the image directly into your mind. And then the interpretation lies only within the narrow band of what you need to be able to fulfill the difference between the one image and another, one scene and another, one cut and another. And throughout the entire history of cinema, the originating principle of this machine, of this tool, has been the writing of movement. And the writing of movement very easily accesses the inner mechanisms of the human mind. Who controls cinema? Yeah, I will get into that now. In the late 1800s, the influx of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe flooded into the country, millions of Jews coming to this country. And one of the various industries that they entered into in mass and took utter and complete control of is the industry of cinema. Hollywood was explicitly created by Jewish influence. Most of the, and I mean most as in the vast majority of executives and producers and creators and decision makers and gatekeepers within the cinema industry were Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. MGM, Paramount, all of the ones that we know, all of the major monopolistic cinema industry leaders were Jewish owned. And this really has a very large influence or impact, because just consider the fact that at that time less than 1% of the population was Jewish. And yet they had control over the most persuasive, manipulative, controlling medium of perception creation, worldview creation, and manipulation in existence. So the easiest way to say this is that the Jew had control over the mechanisms of thought creation for the entirety of the United States of America and beyond, because it wasn't just here. And the fact that they were less than 1% shows us a very obvious problem, in that if they are controlling this perception, they were not Americans, they were Jewish immigrants. They did not share the American culture as of several generations of becoming American would have given them, but Jews don't do this anyway in the world. They maintain nations within nations, states within states. They do not amalgamate, except for the purpose of entering into the controlling arena of a nation. But the fact that we're talking about less than 1% controlling the perception of the homogenous majority is a serious problem, and it portrays the problem that we are discussing a lot these days about the influence of Jews and Judaism upon the world at large. This is a proof of the fact that it is not something to be tossed away. It is not an ambiguity. It is not uh, a superficial notion that Jews control the minds of the nations that they are in today, where they live today. In fact, the proof has been existent since the late 1800s in the United States of America alone, let alone globally. But the fact that Hollywood has been the monopoly industry for outputting cinema to the world also shows that the influence is much wider than just the homogenous majority of the United States of America. Now, if you want to get into a lot more detail about the way in which the history of cinema and the way in which it works, I suggest you go and read the articles from this last week and dive into it. From here, I'm going to talk about the engineering of persuasion and control, the article from Thursday, which gets a little bit into the technical details and gets us to the point where we can discuss where we're at today and what's happening in the future with the mechanisms of persuasion and control. And these are all evolutions of cinema, but not cinema alone. These are all evolutions of the tools that are used to control massive or masses of people, nations, populations at large. So I discussed a little bit already from uh, the sense of how information reaches the subconscious and turns into uh, through kind of the permeability between subconscious and consciousness uh, becomes decision making within the conscious, but does not bring along the logic of how it became a decision. So the decision to vote for a certain political party, the decision to eat a certain type of food, the decision to um, obey or give obeisance to a certain religion or particular practice, whatever it might be, we must question how we came to the decision itself, not just the logical line of the content of that religion or that food or whatever it might be that we're making a decision about, but how we actually came to the decision itself, the mechanisms by which we are making decisions, how we are doing the act of deciding upon whatever it is that we're doing. This is not a philosophical practice. This is a practice of contemplation upon the architecture of our own mind, to be able to look at it and see the full scope of how our mind functions and how we are making decisions, and to find the root of these things, which is the art of meditation as well. Now, we started with the cinematograph. Really, it started well before that. 5,000 years ago, they were attempting to make images move by drawing them in certain ways and portraying motion. But the cinematograph really brought it to the forefront. The Lumiere brothers in the late 1800s made it possible to portray reality as we experience it, close enough anyway, at that time, on the screen, and thus mimic reality, mimic the observation of reality. And over time, obviously, you turn on a television today, and it's the depth of the uh, pixelated clarity is just it's beyond our own capacity with our biological system to observe it with that amount of clarity. And there's other distinctions made now with the technologies that we're now seeing coming out. The way the screen's operated actually creates a stress upon the human system because it is almost too clear, too real in a sense. But all of it has been built off the cinematograph, the frame by frame presentation at a rapid enough speed with the right kinds of flicker removal technology and all these things that allow us to perceive it more and more clearly and closely related to how the we naturally observe our reality. Now, repeated media exposure shapes attitudes and beliefs by normalizing patterns of behavior and perception without the conscious awareness of that normalization. I mentioned this a minute ago, but it is probably the most important facet of all of these things that I'm going to say on this, which is that it doesn't matter what's so much what the content is. Of course, it matters. The content you're observing has an effect. That is the output effect. But how it is delivered to you and how many times it's delivered to you and how regularly it's delivered to you, kind of the impingement of its delivery, will determine how uh, how concretized it is within the mind. And this is not something where we can separate mind and brain because the Um, the brain is a physical construct of storage of memory and of um, relations and the mechanism of how we respond to life. And this mechanism has physical, um, physically engineered neuron connections and bundles of neurons that grow and shrink based on our experiences, and thus the strength of an experience can be seen over time in the amount of um, basically electrical activity and physical structure that is created around that event in the brain. Thus, we can measure just how important an event is by how structured or how it structures the brain. The way we operate in the world is through this physical mechanism, this antenna um, for God and spirituality uh, cr- to create movement out of, to create experience through. So the more that we encounter something in our environment, the less we are resistant to it. And the more a person has the ability to meditate upon themselves, gain a clear idea of themselves, have self awareness, know the self versus other, the stronger their resistance is to persuasion through propaganda, through cinema, or whatever it is in the environment, because they have a strong idea of what I am versus what other is. But the vast majority of people don't have this, and thus the masses of the people are going to be easily swayed into whatever position or direction they are guided into by the propaganda, the cinema, the motion picture, the social media, and now with so many other things that we're about to get into as well, it bypasses all ability to make choice in the first place. The mechanism itself grows to such a intransigent, entangled machine with the body, one entity, the cyborg, uh, in its ultimate form, that to make a decision that is based on an original thought process without influence from the external world becomes nigh on impossible, because the very mechanisms by which at the very root of the mechanism by which choices made, decisions are made, is controlled. Now, if you go into the articles, you'll see 1,000 links of proofs for everything that I'm saying, into studies like the Facebook emotional contagion study, which showed how um, the emotional states of people can be influenced simply by changing the emotional state of one influential or semi-influential account on Facebook, and how that affects thousands of people. And this entanglement of emotion across even the boundaries of the social media platform, where there is no human connection really. It's just the personas online, and how people tie their identities to their online personas, and that affects the real person, with simply changing or altering or creating a post that has a certain emotional kind of bent to it. As the Facebook emotional contagion study, showing how easily people can be manipulated simply by making one post that can reach 1,000 people. Uh, BJ Fogg at the with the Stanford behavior model also describes how um, uh, simple perceptual mechanisms can alter mass perception, and uh, he focuses on very particular objects like uh, video games and how that influences minds. But it stands across the entire field of persuasion and perception creation or manipulation. And the Facebook study also tells us that human beings easily empathize. We take on what is in the world around us, and then we create that as an experience for ourselves. And the the way that we frame our identity is based on a lot of this empathizing with the world around us. We say I'm one way or another. I'm this type of person. I'm that type of person, based on what we've experienced superficially or through third party experience. I didn't experience that thing myself, but because someone I know experienced it, now I feel like I've experienced it. Happens quite a bit. And an example of that would be that people getting bombed out in Israel and Iran right now, and other places, and all the video footage of it, and the people talking about it and all these things. We have a billion experts on what it feels like and what it means, uh, and and the nature of the experience that those people are going through. And now everybody wants to express that they're experts on this issue, that as if they had gone through it. And they did not. And so it's invalid. But the empathy behind it allows us to see this mechanism and how it works, and how easily people can be manipulated to feel one way or another based on whatever agenda is at play for the people who are able to control what is seen and not seen, and how it is seen through the mechanisms of the public forum media. One of my favorite musicians, Buddy Guy, was able to uh, express all of this with one line. He said, "The blues is about being able to feel something you haven't actually lived." And this is a great way to express the fact that we have uh, a predominance of this in the world today, especially with the advent of social media. Everybody's experiencing the world without experiencing it. And this is a problem. It is not a good thing. The mechanism of empathy is constructed within us so that we might uh, uh, cultivate real experiences around us, and learn and grow through those experiences with the people close to us, and create structures that are highly cohesive and functional for creating the best chance of survival with one's local tribe. Fyodor Dostoevsky said, "Man is a creature who can get used to anything, and I believe that is the very best way of defining him." He was talking about propaganda in that statement. Um, and it is that it's just the fact that the USSR created such effective propaganda. They put it everywhere, so that no matter where you went, no matter what you did, the sounds that you were hearing, the sights that you were seeing, the experiences that you were having in any regard, were all the same propaganda hammering into you what the controller of that propaganda wanted you to experience. And it was impossible to do anything else. You ended up feeling and experiencing um, the things that they wanted you to feel and experience. Napoleon Bonaparte also said this about propaganda, that you or not just said it, but he was a master propagandist, and he did this, which is that he created massive amounts of propaganda, and in the correct way to uh, consistently apply it to the population so that they would adhere to what the state was wanting to do, what Napoleon was wanting their behaviors to be. The Asch conformity experiment showed that the nature of the average man's susceptibility to persuasion from public opinion is very easily. The nature of it is that it is very easily manipulated. The Asch conformity experiments showed that the vast majority of people will bend to groupthink despite their own observation, their own um, experience, the reality before their eyes. Resistance to persuasion can be witnessed in the ability of the individual to remain unmoved by public opinion, to frame their decisions as much as to remain unmoved by the moving picture. That is, a person walks into the theater or walks before the propaganda, and they begin to think and become that propaganda, versus the person who walks by it, recognizes it's propaganda, sees it for what it is, what its motives are, what it's trying to accomplish, recognizes that they themselves do not want to entertain this, and continues to walk, continues to go by in peace without altering their identity to the shape of that propaganda, to that new um, content or the context behind it. This takes a large amount of self-awareness to be able to do this, and to do this regularly and successfully in the face of the mass propaganda campaigns that are run by states predominantly. Corporations as well, as corporations are now practically states at their largest level. Individuals think that they are um, free, that they're making choices of their own regard, of their own ability to decipher the world around them, and to make decisions for their greatest health and well-being. But as I said before, this is without thinking about all the things that have been placed into the subconscious through everyday experiences that grind in these things, these decisions, before they even come into your conscious awareness. They have already been decided for you. The individual does not feel guided. He thinks that his thoughts were generated by a logical internal function, and he feels correct about it, and he won't let any challenge to that occur. I often experience this with discussions with Christians. If you pay attention to Liberty Uncensored, you know by now that I am not a Christian, and yet I harbor no ill will, particularly toward uh, uh, Christians. But there's a difference between uh, the acceptance of other religions, and then the evangelical notion that a lot of Christians carry. A lot of the universalist religions carry this idea that everybody has to be part of my religion, and if they're not, they're evil pagans, or they're kafirs, or they're whatever, rather than respecting that there is differences between all people, and your God may be yours, but he does not have to be mine. And the respect between the boundary there is actually a voluntarist ideal, which is not practiced very often. It is the ideal situation that Jesus Christ himself taught to his disciples when he told them to travel the earth and teach everybody that welcomes them, to teach them everything that they know that he had given to them. But if they did not accept the teachings, or told them to leave, that they would leave peaceably and go on their way. But people don't practice this today. And Christians, oftentimes, they present their position, their argument, as I'm a Christian, and thus, due to this fact, I am inherently morally superior and in the right automatically. This is a cop out of a true argument, and it just negates anything that you might say. It doesn't provide for true argumentation, debate, or even a proper conversation. And it is this same idea put into the most applicable source that I can think of that operates this way. The individual does not feel guided. He thinks that his thoughts were generated by a logical internal function. He feels correct. And there's no better example of that than the Christian. Or maybe there is, because all universalist religions, but also anybody who's part of the woke mob would have the same ideas. Everybody who's part of the conservative faction would have the same ideas, that they don't feel guided. They think their thoughts were generated by a logical internal function, and they feel correct. And they won't allow challenges to the core function of their decision, because they've wrapped their identity within that, and to extract their identity of who they are from whatever it is that they're doing would feel like death. And that's why we have the notion of two deaths: the first death while you're alive, and the second death when you physically die. But now it seems like people have to undergo quite a many deaths, because they keep wrapping their identity into new factions, new ideas, new things, rather than remaining objectively uh, uh, distinct from them, and yet participating where it makes sense, but remaining objectively distinct from whatever it is that they're doing, whatever they're engaging with. They don't have to wrap their identity around it. If they do, they should be absolutely 100% sure of what it is that they're doing and not be doing it based off of third-party information or just running along with the next fad or whatever it might be. It should be based on something more real, but it very often is not, and most likely it is not going to be. A man acting on mediated belief is one thing, but a population acting on mediated belief is something else entirely. The individual does not cause much harm on the grand scale of things by acting through this third party information and creating a world around that for themselves. Not a huge deal, but the collection of individuals all doing this, the collective acting on mediated reality, that which has been cultivated for them by those who control the mechanisms that are most suitable for controlling perception, this is a serious problem. And at that point where this system is fully in place, like it is today, it is shaping entire nations and civilizations and global patterns. So what we are facing is not something that can be challenged by entertaining the factions that are totally subsumed into its existence. Participating in the duopoly or participating in controlled religious mechanisms or anything else that is controlled by these entities would be uh, quite negligent on the part of the people, and and it would be showing us the nature of humanity, of those people who do that, to be that of the slave, not of the free man. Free man makes choices based on their own mind, based on their own character, based on their own experiences. They are responsible and accountable. These are not the qualities of a slave. Now, again, if you go to the Thursday article, you'll see a ton of content that you can really dive into these mechanisms. The Federal Trade Commission did a report on dark patterns, and those are structures that are used to prolong engagement, obscure the exit, and reduce friction for continued interaction on websites or on apps or on whatever it might be. So that is, you're trying to leave the website and a pop-up comes up and it says something to you about how you're going to stay, and then you click the X on it, but then it takes you to a new website. When you think you're actually getting out of that website, it takes you to a new website that says, hey, have you thought about this other thing, which is supposed to guide you back to whatever it is that you were originally on, or to some new thing where they have an agreement with another corporation or something like that. So this sort of behavior is the dark patterns that the FTC did a report on, and they are everywhere. And these things are kind of a more overt control pattern of perception. But the more that the people have to encounter this, the more that this becomes normalized, and they accept it as a normal behavior. And thus they not only accept this from the corporations that are doing this or the entities that are doing this right now, but then they start to behave this way in their own lives, which creates a serious problem. The European Data Protection Board also identified this same dark pattern problem. It is not just localized, it is everywhere. Now, the viewer believes he is choosing to remain, but the structure has already decided that remaining is easier than leaving. Right? So you're saying to yourself, okay, I guess I'll just stay on the website. But it was already chosen for you. That's what these structures are built to do, to guide you, right? Even though you don't think you're guided. TikTok's transparency documentation, along with YouTube, shows how they cultivate the streams that you are seeing, particular to your a blend of what they want you to see and what you looked at in the past, right? So they are guiding as well the perception of humanity in very strong ways, because they don't allow the system to organically show you what it is that you're searching for. Search engines have done this as well, predominantly in the past 10 years. 10 years ago, you do a search on Google and you get relatively something, a relative diversity of options to click on to guide you to whatever, or to take you to whatever it is that your outcome you're looking for. Now, that doesn't exist anymore on any of the browsers or anywhere. You have to be particularly putting in the address that you're looking for, and then oftentimes a pop-up will come up and they say, "This is an insecure website," right? And then oftentimes there's not even a choice to move forward with it. So you have to go to a different browser so that you can go forward, and it happens to be just a website that is really benign. It doesn't really mean anything, but it's not within the narrative that they want you to be following. And now they can do this very overtly because people have accepted this in the war of attrition against the free will of man. They have surrendered territory inch by inch until we come to today where people don't have choice. They have the narrow choice to either continue to observe what is being put in front of them, that YouTube demands they look at this, or TikTok demands they look at that, right? Or the website demands that you keep looking at their stupid pop-ups to get to what you are looking for, or to exit and not get what you are looking for. That is the only option today. Now we have all sorts of different mechanisms that are being produced where information is being the information for those who want to experience the freedom to search for what they're actually looking for is being cultivated on other apps and sites and things like this now. But the vast majority of people are still going to be using Google to do their searching. It's just the way of it. Because humanity migrates to authority. What has greatest authority is Google, is the mainstream news, is whatever. And even that, to some degree, is not correct because now authority has shifted into third parties, but those third parties are still controlled by the same entities. Or alternate parties, I should say. Okay, we're getting into it, guys. We're getting close to where we are at today and where this is going for the future. The advent of AI is the advent of the culmination, along with several other things I'm about to mention, but is the advent of the culmination of the Judaic prophecy for the coming Messiah, the AI that is going to be directly tied into the biological neural net that is humanity altogether. And it ties into us and creates it's this collective brain that is the dark Messiah, right? It is the prophetic coming of the Messiah, the Judaic Messiah, not Jesus. And this Messiah is going to come and rule over man. And this is the AI and what this is attempting to do. Fundamentally, at the bottom, this is what it's attempting to do. So DeepMind, research organizations such as DeepMind develop systems that identify patterns across large data sets, enabling prediction of future states based on prior inputs. So it's developing the ability to predict the future. OpenAI and similar research bodies explore how models trained on vast quantities of data can generate responses, anticipate user needs, and simulate conversational and behavioral patterns, basically recording how human beings work so that it can replicate that. So between all of these things, and then organizations like Palantir, which is based off of the Lord of the Rings Palantirs, the ability to see what is happening far away and to be able to know what's happening and to know the future. And I mean, they're just so obvious about all these things, but to know how they all tie in together, that is, and what we can do about it, that's really the goal here. So all these AI systems are really attempting to replicate the collective human mind along a certain agenda, a guiding principle that is held in the hands of the controllers of the AI and controllers of the human perception systems. And that's why we see all these data centers popping up. It's all part of the same agenda. It's why 6G is coming out in 2030, and the Internet of Bodies and the Internet of Things is going to become one, and everybody is going to be chipped, whether you like it or not, because there's chips in the vaccines, there's chips in the air, there's chips in the food that we eat, whatever it is. And when I say chips, I'm talking about very, very small devices that are ingested into the body in one way or another, and then form uh, basically create a cyborg of the human being able to respond to microwave radiation technology um, through various different uh, types and uses of microwave radiation technology. And anybody who's interested in learning about microwave radiation technologies or microwave radiation warfare, you can go and find my zine on my Buy Me a Coffee. It's only $2. You can go on there and read the zine and get updated on what microwave radiation is. Um, and it's very easy to read. There's only one technical part of that zine, but the rest of it is very easy to read and understand. And I break everything down in high particularity so that by the time you're done reading it, you didn't have to read 50 or 1,000 studies. Um, you understand the function of what it is doing. But fundamentally, what that is that is restricting the colloidal osmotic um, um, uh, pressure of the blood plasma, which then creates a deoxygenation of the deep tissues of the body and closes down cellular communication, in which cells commit cellular suicide and release free radicals into the body, which leads to things like cancer, but also every other disease that we see in the world today. And then when you tie microwave radiation fields in with, especially these 5G, 6G fields, especially, when you tie that in with the metals that they are injecting into the body with vaccines or the metals that they are dispersing into the air that are leaching into the soil and into the human body, what you see is the ability to use these fields to have greater control over the human body, to tie it into the Internet of Bodies, Internet of Things, so that the biometric signature of each person can be directly controlled so that they are more easily susceptible to the types of patents and tools that I am about to go into here. The AI is the mechanism behind that. That is the collective brain that is going to operate all these systems. But who controls the AI? It's the same people who control the perception mechanism that is the cinema, by the way. Same people. Now, the various patents that have been uh, showing the way that these things have been going. Now, patent doesn't necessarily mean that these things exist in reality, right? You always have to have that disclaimer. But the thing is, these patents have been proven and they are real, and they show this in the technology that they're putting out with military technologies through DARPA. They're putting it out through obvious and overt declarations of how their new systems work. HARP is the patent and the technology completely aligned. HARP, the very patent of HARP, which people debated about HARP for a very long time, but the very patent that creates that created the technology for HARP says ionosphere manipulation for the purpose of weather modification. Uh, it's very obvious, folks. It's very obvious if you just do the right research. So US 6506148 patent describes methods of inducing physiological effects by modulating visual stimuli delivered through screens, targeting the nervous system through flicker and pattern. That is through your cell phone screen, your television screen, especially smart televisions, smart screens of whatever type, screens that you might see in public, like airport screens, the big screens that they have at the airports. US 5017143 outlines techniques for embedding subliminal visual information within image sequences at levels below conscious detection. So visual subliminal image sequences below conscious detection, meaning the things hidden in the screen, right? What I talked about earlier about the 10,000 things that exist within a screen that cannot be seen by the conscious mind. Well, this is even deeper. Now the technology has gotten to the point where the embedding of this is not able to be seen, whatever level of looking for it you might conduct with your natural observation. US 5159703 extends similar principles into auditory domains describing systems for presenting subliminal messages using acoustic carriers that bypass conscious awareness. Now, that has been known for quite a long time that this is possible, that by using microwave radiation technologies, they can change the emotional state of the person by creating a thermal effect on the brain, but they can also implant words into the mind of a person remotely using these technologies. And there's even whole forums where people have interacted with various um, uh, parasitical class entities, and something has happened between them in some way, and then they go on these forums later because they're receiving all of these uh, messages, audible messages that they can't account for, and then they all come together in these forums and they talk to each other and they realize that, oh, yeah, I had a bad interaction with George Bush one time, or I had a bad interaction with this person one time, and then it just all started to happen. Well, interesting how they all relate to each other in that way. Anyway, US 609-1994 addresses the manipulation of sensory resonance through through pulsative signals, again emphasizing interaction with the nervous system rather than conscious interpretation. The pulsation signals, like on cell phones, the fact that the impingement technology on cell phones is randomized. It is not a constant impingement, that the body can normalize that rate of signal, that pulse, because the body is built to recognize normal pulsation rates, because in nature, everything operates on a certain kind of hertz, right? Certain kind of beat. And it's the same beat, and it's constant, and it's consistent, and the body can adapt to it. Well, they didn't do that with cell phones, even though they could have. They made it random impingement so that the body can never accommodate for it. It's always a shock when it comes, because there is no idea that the body has of when the next signal is going to happen, the next shock wave of electromagnetic radiation. US 4877027 explores the microwave auditory effect in which signals can be perceived as sound through direct interaction with neural processes. This can be seen in the military technologies where they're creating thermal effects with the microwave radiation panels that I'm sure everybody has seen at some point. But now but also they can create auditory effects. Silent sound spectrum. What's it called? The silent spectrum sound system, something like that. I forget exactly what it's called, but it creates a very painful, audible signal, but you cannot hear it. It's not heard except in the mind, in the ear, not externally. Very interesting. So the carrier signal can carry whatever kind of information along it. At this signal level, influence does not require narrative at all. It can operate through rhythm, frequency, and pattern, interacting directly with the mechanisms that process sensory input. That means it bypasses entirely the type of content that is being delivered, except that it is content delivered in the way that the cells of the body might respond to. The very energetic composition of the body is now the target for the medium to inform, to behave in a certain way. Doesn't even have to convince the conscious mind. Doesn't even have to embed subconscious content to permeate through into the conscious mind to make a decision. It informs the body to make the decision inherently in the quality of the delivery mechanism. If perception can be constructed, and if exposure can be sustained, and if behavior can be predicted, then signal level interaction becomes another axis through which response can be shaped, providing a bulwark for narrative. Once The body's already responding to whatever it is that's happening. The narrative can say whatever it wants to guide you to a decision that it wants you to make, but it already knows that you're going to make that decision. Pupil dilation and biometric pressure readings and gaze patterns, and all these things are detected through cell phone cameras. I think whether or not you have the camera on, unless you cover up the camera itself and turn off all signals and antenna and all the stuff. Unless you turn it all off at the source, I don't think it actually turns off and it continues to read that content. And this is why people think to themselves, I think I need a new vacuum, and all of a sudden they're seeing ads for new vacuums because the data is being recorded in ways that are just they're recording extremely detailed data patterns on you based on reading the way that you respond to information that is in your environment. This goes into smart meters as well. Smart meters are recording the data patterns of electric usage in the house, and then they're selling that to third parties as well. But the detail of the smart meter reporting is so extremely detailed that it can tell what brand and what year of that brand hair dryer you used at what time during what day, how often you use it, record that pattern, sell it to a third party. And that third party also can be AI systems that then use that to do predictive model behavior modeling, right? And because it can, it is. So what is digital and what is physical is beginning to dissolve when we start to look at things like National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST definition of smart city systems, which is integrated networks of sensors, data platforms, analytical tools designed to monitor and optimize urban environments, which is everybody. It's not just urban environments. The smart city is the uh, it is the forerunner for creating the dystopic technocracy of the future, in which the communist agenda of an elite class and everybody else, right, the oligarch elites and everybody else who are egalitarian because they're forced to be equal, right, and but that's everybody but them, and who's at the top is the Jews, who will have thousands of slaves each of all the goy. Um, so the European Smart Cities Marketplace, the smart city infrastructure as defined by the International Organization for Standardization, the Smart City Challenge in the United States, all of these systems, they're already constructed. They're already at their performance level, meaning that they can already be implemented. All they have to do now is iteratively employ these things in ways that are under the conscious observation of the population, which is what they did during COVID. They implanted um, chips in people. Um, they started the rollout of the 5G platform, especially in various cities, testing it as they went along. But they really implemented it everywhere. The base requirements to implement it, even in the most rural areas, has been installed at this point. Um, Facial recognition systems, um, and the it's not just facial recognition, but facial recognition systems and recognition of objects through camera feeds that's feed into data centers, which feed AI systems to create centralized control, have been implemented everywhere. And I remember talking about how we needed to fight back against the speed trap cameras long time ago. And nobody really cares to do anything about these iterative steps toward technocracy and dystopic outcomes until it's too late. But it's not just facial recognition; it is the camera's ability to track movement, analyze visual input, identify individuals, and now with COVID coming out, they also showed us what the future is going to look like with these new systems that can track the thermal signature of humans which also leads into the biometric signature of individual humans, especially with the heavy metals that they are pumping into all of us, which are strengthening the signal and making it possible for them to analyze and interpret the information and output specific IDs on the biometric signatures of every individual person. Okay. Now, the next stage of the perception control mechanisms that exist and who controls them is just this. The coming attraction is virtual reality, right? It is the false reality that we put on the Google glasses, or we put on whatever it is that's going to come out for this. And we are not only going to be controlled in our bodies, we are not going to be controlled solely by visual screens that we carry around with us through our phones. We are not going to be controlled only on the level of these external experiences and then the internal chips and the biometric signature monitoring and all this, but we're also going to have a completely false reality presented through us through these mechanisms that will probably eventually be chips in the mind, chips in the brain, but glasses will do, contact lenses, whatever it might finally be that starts to perform this activity. It's the virtual reality, the augmented reality, and you see this with Meta. You see this with everything that they're trying to come out with along this line of thought, which is that they want you to be walking around with this constantly throughout your entire day, to be lessening your interaction with biological reality and to be engaging with a reality that they choose. The reality that they choose that you must be absorbed in at all times and forever from birth to death. Oh, CBDCs. CBDCs are just the next function of this same mechanism, the smart cities and the control of reality is the control of finance as well. Don't spend on things that they don't want you to spend on. Have complete and utter insecurity of one's funds, to own nothing and be happy, this whole thing, right? So the European Union's digital identity wallet shows the way that's going. The EIDAS in the EU, the World Bank's ID4D initiative, promoting digital identification systems as fundamental components of economic and civic participation. The NIST guidelines for digital identity management, the OECD outlines and policy frameworks for digital identity systems within modern economies. They're all pointing at the same exact thing. And remember, guys, they tell us this. They tell us everything that they are going to do. And I am extremely bored with all of the endless content, which I'm sure people even watching this are bored with the content, reiterating the facts of where we're going, because no solutions are coming about to respond to it. Now, some people, they feel safe with just constant information being dumped on them and never having to do anything about it. That might most likely is the majority, actually. But for folks that are like me, that are about cultivating solutions to these problems, the endless information is really just, it's almost toxic at some point to the well-being of the body, because once you know, you know. Once you know the nature of these people that we're dealing with, of these entities that we're dealing with, you can foresee all of the ways in which they go about these things from the get-go. The fact that I even write these articles is simply to identify the problem in a way that's more digestible, because it's just fact-based. You can see everything all at once and just say, okay, I get it now. I never have to look at anything else ever again. I get what's happening, and now I can take action. I doubt very many people actually see it that way when they look through my content, but that is the goal, folks, is to come to solutions, not to just circle around the problem forever. Fact is, CBDCs are coming. In England, they got the digital pound. In the UK, The Federal Reserve considerations of digital currency systems, including the potential to reshape payment infrastructure and financial inclusion. The European Central Bank's digital euro initiative, outlining comparable goals, emphasizing integration, security, and efficiency within a digital financial system. The IMF has likewise examined the global implications of CBDCs and their role in future economic systems. Guys, it's coming. It's everywhere. It is coming. And CBDCs are just the financial component, the larger component. And what I'm talking about here is the fact that our entire perception, the way we think about the world, our observation of the world is utterly controlled. And it has been for a long time. It's just perfected now. And what's coming in 2030? Probably because they move the goalposts depending on how much they've achieved within the timeframes they set for themselves. But by 2030, we're going to have 6G internet of body, internet of things, smart cities. We're going to have people being fully embraced into the injection of chips, which really was the vaccinations for COVID, but it was more than that as well. But we're going to have whether you like it or not, everybody's going to be chipped. Through food ingestion, through air ingestion, water ingestion, through vaccines, through pills, whatever it might be, we're all going to be vaccinated. The mosquitoes they released in Texas and Wisconsin, vaccinating people. These are not conspiracy theories. They are conspiracy realities. And they are right here, right in front of us, been happening. And all the stupid motherfuckers are still sitting around doing nothing, worrying about petty issues that go nowhere, still being divided by their own actions, their own behaviors, their own choices. But then again, is it their own choices? The main point of our topic here is, are you making your own choices or are they guided? At what point do you say, I'm done with all of the bullshit that's been presented to me that has framed the decisions that I've made up to this point in my life? I am going to observe the world from a fresh perspective from this point on, brand new. If a thought comes into my head of something that was that I consider to be concrete in the past, I am going to reanalyze it right now at its root. That's where we all have to be. If you're not there, you're controlled. That's where it is at this point. DeepMind's generative modeling explores how systems can produce structured outputs that mirror real-world complexity. Meta's artificial intelligence initiatives focus on creating models capable of generating and transforming media at scale. NVIDIA's work in AI-driven graphics and simulation further demonstrates how synthetic imagery can achieve levels of realism that approach or exceed traditional capture. Digital twins are being produced. Guys, this is super serious stuff. A digital twin is not merely a visual replica. It is a dynamic model that integrates data, behavior, and interaction, allowing a system to simulate how a real-world environment or process will respond under specific conditions. Initiatives like the European Union's Destination Earth project aim to create highly detailed digital representations of the planet, incorporating environmental, social, and infrastructural data to simulate future scenarios. What do you think the outcome of that's going to be? They're going to create a false VR reality that emulates the Earth, but does not do it based on the reality of what's happening on the Earth. The digital twin, the consciousness of the other mirroring the consciousness of the biological being. Real-time simulation of complex systems. NVIDIA's Omniverse. NASA is doing it. And what is NASA? It is the premier entertainment division of the government. It is it is utter garbage. And for anybody out there who thinks that anybody went to outer space with this launch, sorry, it didn't happen. It didn't happen, folks. In no way, shape, or form did anybody leave the atmosphere of the Earth for this launch, let alone go to the moon or any of this other garbage. It is fake. It is impossible. It's impossible to reach the moon with the technology that we have today. Wernher von Braun told us that we would need 3 rockets filled with fuel the size of the Empire State Building to reach the moon. The Van Allen belt is impossible to bypass with the kind of technologies that we have today. There is no means to get a human beyond the Van Allen belt. So please, let's stop being taken in by these actors, these performers, these fakes. Reality follows the representation of it at this point. The motion picture has moved ahead of the capture, becoming the source of reality and describing the physical biological world being shaped to fit it. So now we aren't capturing reality in an image and then taking a set of images and playing them rapidly before the eye to make it appear like those images are moving. No, now the image itself is reality. And then we are interpreting through the image that it's false reality, but now we are interpreting life through that image. We've come all the way through to the other side. The AI imagery that we see being put out to the world as if it's reality, the composition of the human brain cannot interpret this any other way. It sees it as reality. You respond to it as if it's real. And as such, you are being hacked by the false reality that is being presented by the combination of all these things. It is not a very large group of people doing this. Several thousand people are involved at the core of this instrument that is guiding the entirety of humanity toward its technocratic, dystopic future. It's just that everybody's going along with it. And that brings us all the way back around to the original question of who's responsible? Who's the responsible party? The observer of this or the person who's creating the content? The person who's actively doing it or the person who allows it to happen? In Sweden right now, 1 in 5 women, girls who are 15 years old have been sexually assaulted. 1 in 5. And that's just the reported sexual assaults. There's far more sexual assaults that go unreported because women don't want to report sexual assault often. 1 in 5 are reported right now. Is it the fault of the immigrant who came to that country and is raping people, or is it the fault of the people of that country that are allowing it to fucking happen? In my opinion, because I have an understanding of the way that law functions, what you consent to, what you allow, is what you deserve. So all of these countries that are facing this right now, all of the nations facing the immigration problem and seeing this happening to their people, they absolutely deserve it because they're not doing anything about it. That is the law that goes back throughout all of human history. You cannot avoid that. It is natural law. It's the reason why the conqueror and the slave exist in natural law. If you can't defend your freedom, you don't deserve it. It's not because there's a moral question in there. It's because you didn't do it, so you don't deserve it. You didn't do the action that is required for you to maintain your freedom, and thus you don't deserve your freedom. You are more of the nature of a slave. If we give a fuck about those 1 in 5, or more likely 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 women who are being raped by the immigrants, then we would do something about it. We would not wait around for some permission or some savior to come around. We would go and take action, but we're all hyper individuals at this point. Nobody can take action because it's too easy for one person to go down in the attempt. That's why we have to collectivize. We have to remember who we are. We have to homogeneously collectivize ourselves and take action before it's too late. Anyway, little tangent on that, but it is the same thing. It is the same exact problem represented in its various multifaceted ways, multifariously involved architecture of our enemy and how they affect us. Oh, there's so much information in the Thursday article, folks. I really suggest that if you want to really dive into this, you go there and you follow all the links and you do all the things. Um, Last thing I'll say on the technology component here, I think I've covered pretty much everything. Oh, there's a couple of things. Okay. So the uh, connection, the internet connection that needs to be sustained for the effects of everything that I've discussed here to occur, to actually happen, um, is fundamental. So the telecommunications industry that basically constructs the environment and implements the 5G and 6G and the cellular towers and the internet connections and Wi-Fi and all these things that makes it possible for these things to be built is making it such that there is a constant, pervasive, and perpetual connection to the internet at all times. Without that, none of these other systems can function. It is a crux of the matter. So if telecom were to disallow these things to exist, they would not be able to have an effect. The data centers, the cellular towers, the uh, internet connections of all types, and Wi-Fi, and all these things. 6G implementation would not happen if telecom said no. So there is always a central authority for these things, and in this case, I mean, it always comes down to the state and what the state allows, and the state is supposed to be the will of the people represented, the state of the nation. We don't have that. We have a foreign state. So the second thing besides constant connectivity, and the last thing that I want to talk about here is the technologies that have existed for quite a long time now, consider relatively, that sort of they scream at us to pay attention. DARPA has for a long time been exploring next generation neurotechnology, the ability to um, connect our brains to these technological systems. This is not something that's just Neuralink or Elon Musk or whatever. This is deeply involved in the systems of governance for our nation and nations and for our global nations. These are deeply involved things that are happening and been happening for a long time. But even besides all of these kinds of technologies that are publicly announced, there's the private ones that are never announced, and there's the ones that exist in the gray area. There was a video conducted by West Point where a an educator, plainclothes educator, came in and did a discussion on various technologies that exist that are used in spycraft. And one of them was the implanting of data into genetic material that can then be recorded and read later on by whatever the end source is. So what this means is that you shake somebody's hand, they go through the airport, they go through all of the boundaries of a nation's border, they go through all of the whatever the highest security systems available to man, and they can carry this spyware in their genetic material, which then can be read by those who know where to look for it and how to look for it at the other end. And this is not new. The implanting of imagery, moving images implanted into DNA, is not new. We have to accept the fact that the technology is far more advanced than the common allowance. And we have to accept the fact that the people operating these technologies are opposed to the well-being of the people. And there is no more time, as I have said a million times now. There's no more time. Things have to change. People have to rise up in the proper way, not just in some random revolt, some stupid globular mass that can easily be shut down, as Napoleon shut down the masses by shooting grape shot into those who stormed the parliamentary building, right? Well, this sort of thing just doesn't work. Just a random revolt of the masses it's not going to work, guys. So it has to be done in a properly constructed way, and it has to be done according to law. Even if our enemy is lawless, it has to be done according to law, and it has to be done with proper organization and efficiency and authority, and curated correctly to achieve the result that we actually want. If we rush into the fray and uh, and it's this what happens when you win? If you don't know how to operate a government, or what happens when you win, then somebody's going to come into it. After the uh, abdication of the emperor in Germany, after World War One, it was chaos. Who came in to secure the government was a bunch of foreign Jews. And what did they do? They created the Weimar Republic. What was that? It was the destruction of the homogeneity of those people, the depraved, uh, incessant uh, uh, perversion of a people that had utter, um, just beautiful strength as a nation. Total collapse. And the only way out of it, out the other side, was the return of the homogeneity of the people, both in culture, language, blood, and notions of what they wanted out of their political system to reflect the nature of those people. It had nothing to do with anybody else anywhere else in the world. It was the same thing with the American Revolution, 1776. It was the same thing with all proper revolutions. It was the will of people attempting to exert itself over some entity that did not represent them any longer. But I would say in all the revolutions that we've seen in the last 300 years, they've been guided by the Jewish influence, which is why we are at where we're at today. So we have to do something different this time. We have to do something that actually works, that actually functions to achieve the results of what we are looking to uh, accomplish. With that said, I will mention one thing about what's happening in Ireland right now. Ireland is basically doing what the unions uh, did, the Wobblies did in, I think it was in the 40s when they did this particular one, 30s or 40s. They shut down the trains. They shut down the railroads by encouraging everybody of every different type of trade and trade union. They said, everybody, we're going to shut down the trains. And they did. Nobody went to work of any type of labor or worker, skilled worker, whatever it was. They didn't go to work for the railroad that day. And all the trains shut down. And this was in opposition to the Pullman car company. And the only reason it started up again was that the trains got going and that people went back to work was because Pillsbury, you know, another one of the moguls, called Pullman and said, "Hey, I need these trains to get going again," and made a deal with Pullman. And then Pullman decided to acquiesce to the demands of the union um, and give the people their little bump pay raise and little acquiescence to what they were demanding. But it wasn't anything too serious, and the people felt like they'd won something great. Well, I foresee the same thing happening in Ireland today. It's basically a sit-in. They're locking everything down. They're saying this railroad isn't going to move today. But depending on the response the government sending in the military or whatever it might be, in the end, They won't just send in the Irish military, they'll send in the UN military, they'll send in the foreigners, who don't give a fuck about the Irish people. And, um, and so how this response will be managed, I guarantee you that it happens along the agenda that has been decided by these controlling entities who control perception en masse and guide us down all these lines. The things that we have to do to overcome the problems with the this controlling entity is we have to first counter the way in which our perception has been controlled. We have to overcome that to get at the solution. And now we have solutions. I have solutions for how to overcome these perception problems, but they only come when people decide that they're willing to cooperate together despite small differences and the stupid divisions that are created between man and cultivated and stoked by these same one world globalist Judaic evil parasitical class entities. So with all of that said, I will end this here. Pay attention to the world around you. Take action with those close to you. Physically create relationships, binding you together toward common ends. Don't be subsumed into the wider technocratic culture, the corporatocracy. End those relationships. It is time for bigger things. It is not time for arguing over the petty, stupid things. It is time for us to take bigger action. Always bigger action is needed, and yet people focus on these small and petty issues that don't lead us toward any result. I've been seeing it for decades. No result. Nothing has happened. The furtherance of the agenda has happened. Means everything that these cycles of conversations they're happening incorrectly. They're not doing the right thing. So how do we achieve the right thing? First and foremost, it is in physically gathering with the people close to you, making every effort to accomplish that. Once you have a crew, now you have momentum. Now you have something you can build off of. So step one, go find yourself some people. Make a crew. Gather with those around you physically. Challenge each other to do better than what you're doing now. Help each other to live outside of the control of this system, to break the perception barriers that have been placed before us all, and to break through the indoctrinations that have occurred, and to relieve us of the burden to the technologies that are enslaving us. All right. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you guys for joining.